Hey, what's going on? So let's take a look at what we can do in kind of speeding up the process of working with locators in Blender, otherwise known as empties. So I want to go ahead and switch scenes here, and we'll Shift A, add plane axis, and I'm just going to add one more. So we have two, and I'll leave the name empty, and we'll name it empty offset. So typically in Maya, what we would do is we would drag this over the other one and drop it. What that does is it creates a parent, and it allows us real quickly to have that set up. So as you see, when we pick it up, we have move inside collection, control to link, or shift to parent. So this is a really nice feature. If, you know, typically you would do the parent, the child, control P, object, and that parents it. Kind of a long way of doing it. So if we undo that, we select our offset, hold shift, drag it, drop it. There we go. So we can select our empty. We can grab and move that, select our offset, can move that as well. And if we go back to our empty and we grab it, you can see that our child follows the parent and we don't have any issues there. We can actually add one more. So we'll do a plane axis, and we want that to be a child of this one. And what we can do here is we can move this over, and just for example's sake, we'll do another one and we'll move it up here. And we'll shift select, move that in there, and we get this hierarchical tree. So the thing about this is what will happen is if you select the first one, R to rotate, you notice, as expected, we have the origin point at the center here. If we clear the rotation by Alt R, we can select this one, R to rotate, and we have the pivot point here. And if we select this, the same, we have a different pivot point for each of these locators. So one thing that's really good about this is if you're trying to set up different pivot points on an object like a prop, and you want the pivot points to be in different locations. So we'll go ahead and we'll delete these these locators. And let's do something real simple. So I'm going to set up a cube. On this cube, I'm going to scale it up just a little bit, scale in Y. So SY, SX, and this is going to be our prop. So we'll have basically, if I go into edit mode, then I can control R. Now I can take these, delete the vertices. We can add in under our modifier stack, a mirror modifier. And then I want to control R. I'll bring that down here. We'll go to edit, and we want to go into edge mode, which is here, or excuse me, face mode. We'll select that face, E to extrude. We'll bring that up a little bit. S to scale. And then we'll scale that in Y. So SY. And then I'll take this, I'll extrude along Z axis. Extrude one more time. And I'll take this face, extrude, and I want to delete the face, delete faces. I'm trying to remember the shortcut key. So we'll go to edge here. Hold down Alt, select that, which that selects the entire loop. And then GX. We'll do clipping, GX. We'll go to the center. So basically we make a simple briefcase. And then double tap A. And that gives us the geometry for our suitcase. Real simple. But let's apply this. And actually, it doesn't look like it's going to let us apply it. There we go. Now we'll apply it. So we have this set up. What we would want to do is, because when the person picks up the suitcase, we want to have something in the center here, because right now if we rotate this, then it's going to rotate around this pivot. So if we come up and we enable origins, you can see that the pivot is set to the very center of the object, not necessarily where we want it. So we'll come in, go to wireframe, we'll add a locator or an empty. And what I want to do is I want to have this empty up here. So we can, with that selected, we can hit this little magnet or shift tab. And we want to set it to face. And we can do center or closest. So we go to solid, G, and that sets our locator right where we need it. So if we want to, have something where they grab it, we have a point for them to grab onto. And we can actually move this a little bit. And we'll do G, have it come to the center here. And then we'll turn off snapping. We'll come to empty. We'll name this handle. We'll name the cube briefcase geo. And the reason I want to name this briefcase geo is so this way I know exactly what item it is and that it's actually the geometry. So I'll name this briefcase underscore handle. And we could actually go in one step further and just go lock for locator. So I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to call this underscore offset. And as I showed before, we can hold down shift. We can take this, left click, drag it, drop it, and this will parent what we need. Now for the briefcase, we want the geometry to actually be to the briefcase itself. So this way, if we grab this locator for the offset, we can offset that. We can rotate it and do whatever we need. This affects the geometry underneath it. We can still grab the briefcase handle, move it around, and it doesn't affect the locator offset. So we can animate the locator offset and still have it stuck to wherever this locator is. Now, something to keep in mind is once you look at your location or your translation on this item, if we Control A, apply all transforms to deltas, then look what happens. We actually take our location and rotation, that's all set to 0, excuse me, 0. And then our scale is set to 1, which is what it should be. On our handle locator, we could do the same thing. We could do Shift A and apply all the transform information. So this, on the deltas, this would actually set it to 0. So as right now, our pivot point is here. So if we rotate that, we rotate around the center of the object. If we go to our offset, we rotate around that pivot. And if we go to our handle, we can actually move and still be able to animate, the swing or whatnot from that location. So now that we have that set up, we can go through and we can think of other things that may happen to this prop. So something else that would happen is if they're putting the prop down. Now, it depends on the shot. So if it's going to be heavy and there's going to be 2 hands on it, you'd have to think about that. If it's going to be kind of heavy and you're going to have it bumping against the leg, there has to be a pivot point on the side of the box here, depending on the character. So it might bump like side, it might not. So because when you're walking with something in your hands, like a briefcase, you may unintentionally have where you bump, this section here, or you might bump a section in the middle. So when you do that, you're going to get kind of a twisting, and we'll do that with the offset. So we'll say Z, you might get a twisting of this nature. So you'll still have the rotation of Y, and then you might get something like that, where it bumps forward and kind of overlaps the leg. That is all possible with this. So let's go ahead and let's look at adding one more locator. well, two more locators. So we'll shift A, empty plane axis, add a second one. Now, what we want to do here is we want to set this one up so it follows a briefcase, but we want this to be able to give us a pivot point of the briefcase itself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to here. We're going to go into edit mode and I'm going to select edge. I'm going to come back to our out of edit mode, come back to our empty, shift tab, edge, center. And we'll take a look at the solid G, and we want to set it right here on the very edge, right there. We'll take this other empty, and since we have this, set up like this, we'll just name this. Typically you would have some indication of what's going to be the front. So you might have the front here, you might have the front here. Typically the front's going to be on the outside. So we'll name this briefcase bottom front pivot. We'll copy that and we'll say offset. Now, as always, take your offset. It's a child of the pivot. So now at this point, what we want this to do is, like I said, we want to be able to control this section. So if we go to have it and we want to swing it and set it down, we have somewhere to actually pivot from. So we'll take this on our bottom front offset, or bottom back offset. We'll do the same here. And those need to come down under this. So now let's test this. If we have our handle, if we have our offset, if we have our back pivot, now you see how that doesn't work? That doesn't take the geometry with it. So what we need to do is we'll take this, we'll drag it up underneath that. And we need to look at the transforms. So we'll apply the deltas. Let's go into wireframe. There's our offset. So our offset we can actually take out of there. Now, this is where we actually have to work on it a little bit. So we do have the parent, but we need to do the inverse. So we can take this, shift select, pull it out, select the parent, control select the child, control P, without inverse. Actually, I did that backwards. So we'll select this one, control P, without inverse. And then we can take this, we can shift select, move it underneath. So I'm kind of looking at what's happening here is the scale is off. So control A, apply scale. And then we'll do that again. Shift, drag it in there. So I'm trying to see why this is actually, so if we pull that completely out, so if we alt clear, there we go. So we just had some transformations already on that, and that's why that was acting that way. So you can kind of see what's going on here. So if we grab the briefcase handle, move it around, grab the offset, we can swing. Yeah, still move it. If we grab this pivot point, then we move around that. So we could actually take this handle, rotate on X, and I was rotate on X. If we put it there, and then we wanted this one, RX. So that gives us that extra pivot point of, you know, being able to set that down on something. And you can see, you know, this gives us a nice way of being able to work this. And of course, you know, you could select this one, still gives you that. But if we clear rotation, Alt R, we're back to where we needed to be. So this is pretty much set up for animation right now. The only thing that we would need to do is we go through and take the handle locator, and then we would set up a constraint to the right hand And then we would have the right hand offset, and then the offset would go to the handle locator with a constraint, a parent constraint. And then that way, once you go to grab it, then you can actually constrain it to that. We might add something like a palm to it, so we can put the locator right on the palm. And then when they grab it to pick it up, it goes from that point. So it's a real easy way without rigging to be able to make those changes. And that's definitely something that you want to do, is you can go through, make these changes without doing any changes to the rig. And by adding locators, it gives you those extra pivot points and allows you to do animations a little bit easier than you normally would if you were to say, you know, picking something up, wanting to slide it, and then it hits, and then you wanted to drop it. You know, you would have the pivot point up top, you would have the pivot point on the bottom, and you would need to be able to let that go and have it drop. So there's a lot of different things like that, but all that can be done with locators. No rigging. And you can even do the opening and closing of lids and all that kind of stuff with the locators as well. Again, without actually having to rig anything. So I hope this helps, and I will see you guys next time.